You're all centered, and we're live. No, we're actually not live. I was just talking to another attorney, and she said she was nervous. I said, "Why are you nervous?" She goes, "Because she was thinking it was live." And I said, "It's not live. You can say anything. We can cut it out." And then Nico, who's behind the scenes, trust me, he's going to make it look good. So
I know he will.
well, Dee, so nice to have you here. I really thank you for joining us. I know how busy you are.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
One of the things I liked about when I was reading up on you was that you talk about being a family, trust, and estate planning attorney. But the next sentence in your bio is, as a wife and mom of 4 great kids. Now, that meant a lot to me because that's how I feel too. It's like, yes, you're a business person, but you're a mom and a wife first.
Correct. Yes. And I thought you were going to say something about the qualifier, the great kids. Depends on the day, right? But yeah, no, I love, I think like most of us parents, I think, being a parent, being a family person comes first, career comes second. So definitely love my family and my husband and the kids, and we even have a couple furry kids at the house. Yeah.
Nice.
Dogs. Yeah.
I find that when you reach that balance between the family and the business, that they work well together. And if your business is taking up is too much of the priority, or it shouldn't be the priority, but then also what happens is it affects your family and vice versa. So if you take care of yourself at home and you do keep that the priority, your business seems to thrive.
Absolutely, and I like what you said, Scott. I think the magical word is that balance, and this is one of the reasons why I decided to go on my own. And before becoming a business owner, I worked in the corporate world. I was a business lawyer, corporate transactional law, and kind of the 9 to 5, which extended into later hours and weekends and long commutes. I used to travel from like Santa Monica all the way to what was it, South Orange County. That used to be I think that was my longest drive. Yeah.
Ouch.
And, yeah, it was pretty treacherous. So decided, when I had enough and I really wanted to be around the kids a little bit more, to make the switch. And my husband thought I was crazy because I had a cushy job, steady paycheck and all of that. But he understood where I was coming from and made that decision. And it's been great. I've been on my own for about 8 years now.
Oh, that's great. It's so nice when you can control your schedule like that, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So, not but, at the same time, as being a business owner, you will find me here on the weekends sometimes, Saturdays, just kind of catch up on things. But I love what I do, and I don't consider it as work. It's really interesting. It's kind of like my fifth baby, and I love what I do. I spend a lot of time doing it. Yeah.
That's great. That's what I like to hear. Sometimes though, you got to catch up. I understand, and there's got to be, because then you can be more present for the quality of time that you're going to have. And so every now and then, when I got into the business, it was interesting because I was fortunate to get a lot of business out of the gate, because it was when anyone can get a loan. It was 20 years ago. So I was like, if I had a client, we were going to close the deal, and it was great. But I immediately, as I started to do more and more deals, I decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start a team so that I don't have to work my own open houses, and I'll only work some caravans, and they'll handle running around the buyers. So I had that vision early on, and it really helped. And also because why would I work my open houses? If I work my own open houses, here's the challenge. It's not about me. Yes, I don't want to be there because I want to be with family, but I don't want to represent both sides. Because if I represent both sides, the dual agent, it's so hard to act as a true fiduciary and represent them fully. So I'd rather incentivize my team, give them most of the money for whatever they bring in. Yeah. And so it works really well.
And Scott, have you always had a team, like from day one, or is that something you figured out along the way?
I figured it out after, I think it was my 3rd or 4th year in. I started really looking into it, because by then I was fortunate again, like to have 200 or 300 deals under my belt already. And so at that point I went, no, this is the time to do it. And then we started, we were having our 2nd kid, and then our 3rd, then we adopted our daughter about how many years in? Like 5 or 6 years in. And so it was like, I want more flexibility. So started up the team. It was great. Speaking of which, how does that work for you? I mean, do you have what does it look like behind the scenes for you? Because I have a ton going on behind the scenes, but you
Yeah.
almost only really you only see me and talk to me, but everyone else is doing all of this work behind the scenes.
Yeah,
True,
they're making you all look good, right? All of
for
them are
sure.
making you look good for sure. Yeah, so I have an assistant, I have a like a office assistant, I have a legal assistant, I have a web person, so small team. And I am looking to grow, so we're kind of taking it slow, and want to make sure the quality of service is always there as we're growing.
Hmm.
But yeah, small team. I love, being here for my clients, giving them the personalized attention. I think
Uh-huh.
that's why I wanted to have my own business. I didn't want to necessarily delegate the face time that I have with my clients. I definitely want to be here for that. But yeah, the rest of a lot of the admin things, could be delegated, and I've been doing that. So it
I
frees
love
up
it.
more quality time with, with the clients. So it's really nice.
But it's amazing if you have the right team, how they can make you look so darn good.
Absolutely. And with that being said, also we met each other in our networking group,
Uh-huh.
and I also think the professionals that we align ourselves with, and we foster relationships that makes us look good, in front of our clients.
Hmm.
Also, because we're able to provide so many different services for our clients just by making the right introductions. And I know recently you've connected me with a couple of your colleagues, and
Hmm.
I'm looking forward to getting to know them and see how they could potentially benefit my clients. And it's been really I love our networking opportunities,
Oh
with other
yeah.
members, and it's really great.
Yeah, when someone said to me early on, the best thing I like about this group is all the connections and resources. And I went, what is he talking about? I'm here for business. I want to support my family. What's this person talking about?
Yeah.
Now, all these years in, it only took me a while to understand that. I realized, wait a second, man, I get probably 3 to 5 calls or texts per week saying,
Yeah.
hey, do you have someone for this?
Yeah.
Do you have an agent in New York? Do you have this? Do you have a great plumber? And it's like, if I don't, I'll put it
Yeah.
into my mastermind group or my team thread, and I'll go and I'll have someone within minutes. And
Yeah.
then I always have someone through our networking group. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's truly become one of the biggest benefits of that networking.
Yeah. I get so such a good feeling. I get so excited when I make those introductions, and things are going well.
Hmm.
So it's really very rewarding.
Yeah, awesome. So let's talk about you a little bit more because
Yeah.
we talked about your balance and behind the scenes and stuff, and we're going to get to the real estate hell because so far it's real estate heaven. I get that, or real estate purgatory, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But so, what is your sweet spot? Like, because I know that you're transactional, you're not a litigator because you're not crazy
Hmm.
like those litigators. That's like my
No.
goodness. But what is your sweet spot? What really makes you passionate, and getting up and actually wanting to go to work?
Yeah. So the passion in me is, just ensure, well, I love working with families, especially families who are young, up and coming. They might have little kids. They're starting their lives together. And it's so impressive to me when they're meeting with an estate planning lawyer, because most often people will say, I'm too young to do any estate planning. I'm going to do it when I'm maybe after retirement, when I'm older, when I'm in my 60s, 70s. So um, it's exciting for me to meet with first time clients who are on the younger side,
Uh
because
huh.
they're really doing the right things in the right order. And then I'm able to connect them with, financial advisors for their, as they're growing their wealth, real estate professionals as they're looking to build up their business portfolios, because they do
Hmm.
have real estate investments. So I think for me, just realizing that they're doing the right thing, and they're also doing something that's completely voluntary. Like I'm not making them do anything. They call my office because they've heard about the potential benefits of, doing
Right.
an estate plan and all of that. So, it's something that's completely, coming from them, and I'm able to guide them and be there for them, and, educate them. I love educating them. There's so much,
Hmm.
uh, I guess, unknowns, or kind of like you don't know what you don't know, and it's kind of fun to figure out the things that they may not know, and kind of build on that.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, so for me, it's just helping. I think that's why another reason why I got out of the corporate world is because I wanted to work with people and be of service to people, individuals, not necessarily
Hmm.
entities, so that's why I made
It's more
that shift.
personal.
Yeah, very, very personal.
For me, it's like the difference between my dad always said if he got into real estate, because he was in real estate, he was like my mentor and hero.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
he's just my dad. My dad was the best. He just was, and so I carry him right here. But he said if he got back in, or
Yeah.
he started again, he would do commercial. And I said I feel differently because commercial is very numbers. It's very cold.
Hmm.
It's very different. And the residential, you're dealing with people. Now, yes, it's more stressful, it's more emotional. But when you can really help, like there's a family we helped recently, these siblings, they're older, had lost their sister, and they were in a situation where they were going to go ahead and just sell quickly
Yeah.
because they had a reverse mortgage and they were worried about all of a sudden the bank coming at them and whatnot. And I said, it's not the way it works. Just slow down a second. Slow down a
Yeah.
second. Let me help you. And by the time we did it, by the time we advised them and brought in the right people, a reverse mortgage specialist to tell them what I was saying was right because
Yeah.
they needed to hear from them. And then we just brought in the team. And by the end of it, it took us, an extra few weeks to be able to get it to market, but we ended up making them an extra. It must have, I mean, realistically, an extra $75,000 because they didn't sell it quickly.
Yeah.
They took a
Right.
moment and let us advise them and work through it. I love it when that happens. That makes me feel good. It's nice to be paid because I do want to support my family, but it's nice to
Right.
feel good about what you're doing.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, I'm sure they must have been so thankful they waited and just trusted you and had the
Mhm.
patience, to just
Yeah,
kind of yeah, rely on your guidance. So what
yeah,
a nice story. I love that.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
what's nice is there's always a bunch of them
That's
each
how
year that happen, and you go, "Wow, I was part of that." Or I'll go to my buddy's house, and he hadn't had a house since he's like pushing 50, doesn't
hmm
own a house, and so there's a sale of a house coming. Turns out it's somebody he knows, and I said, "What if we did this, this, this?" So we're going to structure a deal so we can get the work done. It can be worked into it. It's in your so she gets what she wants because we need to take care of the seller, and then you get what you want, which is a house that's updated within your budget in a nice neighborhood. And then I'll give up some of my commission. So it's considered a friendly deal, as opposed to so I acted as a fiduciary to the deal because
Okay.
everyone had to know what's going on. At the end of it, everyone is so happy, and I go to
hmm
give him the keys, and I said, "Oh my gosh, you know why this worked out?" And he says, "Why?" I said, "Because everyone got along, everyone did the right thing, and now seller, our friend, got what she wanted." And went out of her way for you. You got what you wanted, gave it to her, and he was like at the point of tears. He was his first house, and he had teenage kids.
Wow.
I love these
But
stories. Yeah,
but realistically, I do too. But how often does that happen where everybody's getting along like that? These friendly deals. In reality, though,
not too
not too
often.
often. Yeah. So you got to savor those moments.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Yeah.
deals where you go, "Hey, I'm so glad it happened this way, and my
Yeah.
efforts made this happen," and you go, "That's wonderful." But the ones where everyone works together, oh my gosh, it's such a beautiful feeling, and it really is a sincere win-win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
It
so
reminds.
we're getting so ooey gooey here. This is supposed to be real estate hell.
I know
So
what's going on.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we should do. Maybe I should just do a new show. And ever since you.
That's funny.
What I
Yeah.
would like to hear from you is about some stories of maybe things that didn't go as well, and
Yeah.
they could have ended well or ended horrible, whatever. But I would love to hear a couple of your stories if you're open to sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one story that I want to share with you is a story which kind of surprised me, and it kind of happened on early on. Sorry about that. It kind
Oh,
of
no worries.
happened early on in my career as an estate planning lawyer. And what happened was I was doing an estate plan for a young family. One of my favorite clients to serve. And as we were finishing the estate plan and getting it wrapped up, the husband says, Deanie, I have another separate matter I could use your help with. My father passed away a few years ago, but don't worry, I heard from you, about the trust and the benefits of having a trust. And luckily, he had a trust himself.
Hmm.
He didn't have many assets. All he had was a house. And one of my brothers is living in the house. We just haven't had a chance to move it, into our names, after he
Hmm.
passed away. So I said, yeah, I'm happy to help you. So after we got wrapped up, I said, please send me your dad's copy of the trust. What's the property address? And I remember I'm reviewing the trust. The trust was a bit old,
Hmm.
and I think it was even like on some yellowish paper, like it
Oh
definitely
no,
dated.
not a good
However,
sign.
I mean, don't think that just because it's a dated trust that it's not legal, because it was illegal, there's
Hmm.
nothing wrong. It was simple, straight to the fact. But I don't know if you know where I'm going with this.
I
When I
think I
looked,
do.
yeah, when I looked up the property information on title, it was in his name. It was in the dad's name.
I saw that coming.
No reference to any trust. So I called, excuse me, I called my client and I said, the trust is old, it's fine. But did you know that the property was not in the trust? And he had no idea. Like he was floored. He's like, but our dad told us and he took care of everything. And, we
Hmm.
didn't meddle with his business. And he said, don't worry, everything will work out. So anyway, so what happened with that was that I said, unfortunately, I won't be able to help you because it's got to go through probate, and I typically don't handle probates. As I like to joke, I do prebate work.
I
Funny,
like that.
um, I like to, do make sure that people don't end up in probate like his father, unfortunately, or the estate did. So, but he did ask me as a favor. He said, we don't know any other lawyers. Do you mind, helping us out? And I did. Eventually, I agreed to help him with the probate, and I had, I was able to help him. But what I want to share with you is, and maybe
Hmm.
you're familiar with this in the real estate world, how long this probate is taking. It's literally just the administration for one piece of property out in the South Bay. And I think we're going on the end of year two, and
Uh-huh.
there's no fighting, there's no complexities, nothing. So 2 years later, we're finally getting down to, where they're going to transfer the house out of the probate. And again, so the reason I'm sharing, it's not necessarily a horror story. I think it's more of well, maybe it is, for the family because now they had to wait for so long. They weren't able to sell the property
And
for a
all the
long.
money it cost, all the money and stress associated with it, just drag
Yes,
everything out.
absolutely. Yeah. So in California, probate fees are a percentage of the value of the estate, as you probably know. And the percentage is pretty high. It's a
Hmm.
staggered percentage rate. Typically, it's about 5% usually the way it works out. So, it's pretty unfortunate that this happened. But the I guess not the story, the message of this story, that
Yeah.
the reason I'm sharing it with you is that even if you set up a trust, any client out there or any family that sets up these trusts, make sure that you get assistance with the transfer of the assets into the trust. Oftentimes, people do estate planning on their own, or maybe they go to someone who's a little bit cheaper.
Hmm.
People are easily swayed by saving, some money. Maybe you've seen those commercials on TV,
Right.
wine and rails for $3.99 or something like that.
Hmm.
But they're not going to help you with transferring assets into the revocable living trust, and that's critical. And after you've transferred it, stay on top of your assets.
Hmm.
Meaning, if there's any changes, if maybe you're going through a refinance, because the interest rates are more attractive, make sure that if there's any change in the title, from where you're pulling the house out of the trust to refinance, make sure it goes back into
That's
your
a big
trust.
one.
Transaction is done. Yeah, I see those often too. Those second
So,
steps are missed.
is there, well, it's a silly question. Is there, if you catch it quickly, is there any workaround, or is it like, no, dad passed, it didn't
So
happen?
yeah, there's a thing called the Hexstat petition that we try to use as lawyers to try to, it's kind of like a pleading with the court to say, hey, this was an oversight. This property or this asset was supposed to be part
Okay.
of the trust. but you're taking a chance. You're going to have to show evidence that you intended to have this asset as part of your estate, part of your trust, and then you're kind of leaving it up to a judge to make that decision. So we don't want to be in that situation, but there's been, cases where we could try to, maybe like with a mortgage, with a refinance situation, there's something that we can try. We have a little
Right.
tool in our arsenal, but it's not guaranteed.
It would stand to reason that it
Hmm.
was taken out. It wasn't a trust and it was taken out, and then you'd have to refinance. I mean, it would stand to reason. Any reasonable person you would think,
Right.
but don't count on
Absolutely.
that. What's that called
Yeah.
again, by the way?
Hexstat. Hexstat petition. So it's HEG. I think there's two G's.
Hmm?
STADT. Hexstat.
Petition.
Do you have a client that might be might be in need of this?
I don't currently, but it's good to
Yeah.
know because
Yeah.
what I do while we're talking is I actually put together titles and
Okay.
so I usually choose the
Yeah.
top three that I think are going to be great. But then I think, oh,
Okay.
this would probably be good for her to use herself. So when you say
Yeah.
that, I'm thinking, oh, even if we don't use that, whatever
Yeah.
one of her reels, now you have this to post yourself if you want. Because I
Yeah.
think it's interesting. It's great information.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So that was one of my stories early on. When I became an estate planning lawyer, kind of
Hmm.
came out of nowhere, and I was I had heard about stories like this, but to kind of see it on my desk, I was very surprised. And subsequently, I've seen these cases so often, but luckily the property owner is not deceased, right? So
Hmm.
I meet with a lot of clients who come in for, they're not my clients initially, they're just people that are referred to me. And they already have an estate plan set up and they're just coming in
Right.
for a review. And we oftentimes find a lot of these mistakes. And I'm glad. I always tell them, good thing you're here, because if you weren't, look, I have a whiteboard in my office, like right behind me where I meet
Uh-huh.
with my clients in the conference room. And I have a whiteboard and I literally like write down all the assets that are not in the trust. And I present to them, okay, if something happened to you today, even though you have this fancy binder in front of me,
Hmm.
everything's great, it's executed the right way. All these assets are going to go through probate, so they're looking at me like, what?
Right.
Yeah.
So do you
So
have
it
a
was
checklist that you
surprising to hear
use
that.
with? So when you meet with someone, do you have a checklist that you go through to say, okay, well, I'm going to check on this, just to make sure nothing's missed?
Yeah, so we do a thorough, actually have a 50-point checklist when I do estate plan reviews.
Hmm.
So these are clients with existing plans. So I have a checklist, a very thorough checklist that we use. And then for
Uh-huh.
first time planning clients, it's just part of our process where we do another thorough meeting. My initial meeting with our clients is up to 2 hours. It's
Uh-huh.
not a 30-minute meeting, where I'm just taking down some personal information and sending them on their way with their legal documents. It's really an opportunity for me to get to know them, get to know
Uh-huh.
their family dynamics. We review all the assets to see how what they have in their estate and how all these assets are titled. So it's a really thorough conversation because my goal is to kind of lay out for them what they have, kind of like we start from the ground up, like this is how you have your life essentially laid out. And I think, well, they're surprised, when they see it how it is laid out. But from that point, that's where they can make decisions about moving forward. They can clearly see, based on how they have their family, everything, their life set up. If there's any risks, if there's any pitfalls, if there's things that could land their family in probate. So a very thorough process
That's awesome.
to
That's
get
awesome. I love
to
that.
get them to the to a better to the better side, I guess, to a
Yeah,
better
that's great.
perspective.
That's the way to
Yeah.
protect people. Do you have any other, do you have a last real estate health story you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. So an interesting one was with a client. She was an older woman, had amassed quite some wealth, and she was planning for her distributions. She had some interesting conditions, before she would be okay with passing down her wealth
Hmm.
to her kids. and she had I think she had 3 kids, and all adults, I want to say probably 40s, 50s.
Hmm.
And one, I think one of them had these conditions of ensuring that the child is always communicating with her on a daily basis, either
Uh-huh.
text, either FaceTime, whatever, whichever form of communication. But the more surprising one was a condition about weight. And I
Hmm.
found that interesting because, I could see maybe in the client's mind, yes, you have a certain idea of a weight, um, but so at first it was very puzzling to hear that,
Hmm.
but I had to ask some questions just to make sure that, the conditions that they were asking for were not conditions that would be against public policy, or just
Hmm.
conditions that would be maybe like illegal, or like something that just could not even be put into effect. So one of the things I mentioned to her, I said, well, what if your child has a health issue? Like what if they
Right.
can't maintain this weight, right? Or whatever the case may be. And that helped. I think when I came from a different perspective and I educated her a little bit, because if you put certain conditions like that, a
Hmm.
court might find them not necessarily against public policy, but just maybe impossible to be fulfilled for
Right.
different reasons. And then it would void the whole thing. So you have to be careful, when you're kind of maybe being a little too creative with your conditions or expectations
Right.
before, passing down. So that was interesting to me.
Well, question. In this
Yeah.
case, what was her reasoning for doing that? Was it because she wanted so and so to stay healthy, or was there something different that was maybe a little bit like,
It
maybe
was
you
the
should stay?
health, the obesity part, absolutely. But for me, it was more, I was on the outside and kind of, I wasn't
Sure.
involved in the family dynamics. And I thought, from a health perspective, what if,
Right.
they can't do that, or maybe they need to be a certain weight. I didn't go into too much detail like that, but it did help to sway the, the decision a little bit.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting. So I haven't
Yeah.
heard of that one before either.
The other
So,
one I wanted to mention, because you're in the real estate world, is there's a rule that's called the restraint against alienation. You're not able to, you can't put in rules. For example, I had a client who said, I don't want my family to ever sell any of these properties. I want them to stay in the family forever and ever. So I want a blanket rule: you cannot
mhm,
sell this house, and that you can't do that. You should be able to. There's a rule. I believe that's what it's called, the restraint on alienation,
uh-huh,
which you can't prevent a property from being sold unless you have some specific reason, or there's got to be a good reason. But
mhm,
um, I could see where she was coming from. She was trying to protect. She was amassing this wealth,
mhm,
but you need to also give flexibility to the trustee to be able to sell the home if needed. So you
mhm,
can't say that, I mean, allow the trustee to make the property productive, make the right investments, sell, buy, give
mhm.
them flexibility. But to put an outright, you know, condition like that is it goes against public policy. So that was interesting too.
Right. See, this is why you're invaluable
Yeah.
because you
So I
know
don't know
stuff
how
that most of us would
like
never even
that.
think about.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Good
Great.
stuff. Good stuff.
I do have one last question for you, and that is, do you have a charity or cause that is close to your heart you want to shine a little bit light on?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we my husband's a firefighter, recently retired.
Hmm.
So a lot of the families we work with are firefighter families.
Hmm.
And a recent charity that I've really gotten very interested in is called the Fire Up program. And it started by a friend of mine who's actually a client of mine. That's how I met him. He's a firefighter. His name's Kevin Welsh. Shout out to him. But he started this program with, I believe, a couple of other firefighters. And it's what they do is they host retreats for men
Hmm.
to build camaraderie, to build resilience, They talk about faith. They talk about family. They talk about service.
Hmm.
And it's such a beautiful thing, I think, especially maybe men that didn't have the, growing up, maybe, the
Hmm.
parent figure that, that maybe they wish they had, or maybe they want some challenge in their life. I know they do some rigorous programs,
Uh-huh.
athletic programs, and, those ice baths too, which don't, I could never do stuff like that, but, anyways, so yeah, so we like to support them, as much as we can,
That's
and
great.
the support goes towards, paying for the maybe someone that can afford to go, or paying for equipment or meals, and so it's a great program.
That's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that when we talked earlier, but I really like that. I really like that. I think that's fantastic.